Morning folks, Kevin here. Well, it's September 7th, Thursday, 2017, and today I'm up near the compost piles. So over there is the weed composting series that we did. That's the one, the first composting series, the large composting series we did earlier. And right behind me here is the most recent composting series that we're starting. The weed composting pile is still doing well. It's in the upper 140s right now, and you know, it's going to retain heat it's going to generate heat for the next couple of weeks anyways. Well, it's going to be generating heat for quite some time, but it's going to be needed to be turned potentially once a week, once every 4 days, something like that for a bit of time. And I'm very satisfied with how that pile's turned out. This pile we started the other day, and this consists of 2.5 loads of the manure and hay that came from Purpose Farm. And then I started off doing basically lasagna layering, not the Cornell method of lasagna layering where they're talking about greens and browns and greens and browns. What I'm referring to is basically just like you're making a lasagna, you're putting layers in to increase the diversity within the pile. So we have all of the different elements, integrating the elements well, as opposed to being big clumps of whatever material, a big clump of manure, a big clump of hay or straw, or putting a bale in there. It just evens out the whole, it makes the mix much better, much quicker, and all. So we started off with putting the base layer down with the hay and manure. Then I took the cauliflower, the stems and leaves and all, and placed a layer on top of that. Then another layer of the manure, about 2 yards each time of the manure on it. Then the next layer were weeds that I harvested from the horseradish row here. So I went ahead and grabbed all the weeds out of there, laid that down, and then put the more of the manure and hay on top of that. And that's where I left it in the last video. Since then, I've harvested the more corn and gathered up all the corn stalks. I took the corn and I folded it in half because it's quite large, brought it up and put it in layers in here as well. So there's, I think, 7 or 8 layers of corn, with the stalks being in different directions each layer. So each layer I'd put on, and so they might be all going north and south one layer, and I'd put manure and hay on top of that, and then I'd go northeast, southwest direction, so on and so forth. So there's either 7 or 8 layers in there. And then I went ahead and yesterday morning I harvested the cabbage, a lot of, 16 big crates of cabbage. And so I took all their stalks and leaves and put that on top of it, and then took more of the hay and manure. And so that basically finished up the amount of hay and manure. And I'll post another video pretty soon about the changes we're making in the chicken coop. But I decided yesterday, since we've been having so much rain lately, to go into the chicken coop. The day before yesterday, I took down, did some deconstruction inside of the chicken coop, and then yesterday I went ahead and shoveled out all of the bedding material, which is lots of manure. And in a previous video, I can't remember exactly when, I'll try and put a link up there in the right hand corner, showing how I had done, piled up all of the greens, the leaves and materials up underneath the chicken perch. And what the birds would do is they break that down, spread it out. And so inside of the chicken coop, lots and lots of leaves that I collect last fall. There's some wood chips in there, lots of vegetable material in there, including, the corn cobs, you name it, lots of materials in there. And the chickens basically leveled it all out over time, and I'd repile it and they'd level it out. Typically what I do is I take that material and put it out in the food forest around the nut trees and fruit trees. But I decided I'm going to go ahead and create a capping on this because that material was so dried out. I'm going to turn the camera on and show you where our temperatures are at. So last night I just got this material on here, so let's see where they're at. Okay, we're close. It's about 168 on this thermometer. And we're about 160 on this thermometer. So the temperatures are pretty darn high. And you know the rule, we want to keep the temperatures above 145 and keep them below 165, and we're already over that. And I just got this piled up yesterday. How much of a concern is that? Well, I'll know when I go to turn it. Is there an anaerobic smell to the material as I'm turning it? I doubt that I'm going to have that issue, and when I've done this before, I haven't had an issue. I've had it get up to 170 before when I'm building these piles in this way. The reason that I think that this has worked out so well in the past, and it potentially will work out pretty darn well today, is because of the materials that we're using. So if I got materials, whether it's sticks or the stalks to the corn, and they're directed in such ways that they create air spaces all throughout the entire pile, then the oxygen isn't depleted and we don't switch to an anaerobic state right away. But let's see. I'll go ahead and turn the pile now and see what we've got. Okay, the pile turning went pretty well, and I'm going to try and recall the few points that I was thinking about when I was actually turning the pile. Hopefully the wind isn't too bad so that you can hear me. The first thing that I would say is there's definitely a temperature stratification throughout the pile. The highest points in the pile are much warmer than the lowest points, almost. At the very top, due to convection, there is some cooling. But the pile actually gets warmer as it gets higher. And that's evident. I don't know if you're able to see it during the turning process, but those materials like the cauliflower and the weeds, which were at the base of the pile, really way down here at the base of the pile over there, those materials still have a significant, there's no significant changes morphologically. They're still green, they look unchanged typically, because they're at the base of the pile and didn't get the warmth. And with that gradation or stratification of the heat, the microorganisms have an ideal, each organism that's in the colonies has an ideal temperature range that they work in: oxygen, moisture, temperature. And when we get to those higher temperatures, many of the microorganisms really proliferate like crazy and do lots of decomposition. So the materials that are in the warmer part of the pile, like some of the corn, as you saw higher on, and the cauliflower near the very top, I don't know if you're able to see that, but they had no green pigment in them anymore. They were yellow or white, very liquid looking, and breaking down really rapidly, whereas the weeds and the cauliflower stalks at the base of the pile, those look relatively unchanged. The aroma of the pile smelled like manure, just typical, normal, which is fine. No anaerobic smells at all, so that's good. Now, regarding the moisture, now we've had some rain recently, and all of that plant material has a high moisture content as well. So the moisture in the materials that were used to build the pile originally was probably higher than the 50% content ratio due to the rain and the material there. However, the material that came out of the coop with the ducks and the chickens and all, that was protected from the weather, so that was drier, and that was put on the outer surface. So as we mix the materials, they're going to distribute that moisture between the various materials. As the pile heats up, the moisture is going to, a lot of it's just going to work its way up and go off and be evaporated. And so it was good to put the drier stuff on the top initially. Often these piles will get much wetter towards the base of the pile. That's why we dig in deep when we're going to do a moisture test. Was there another point? So you could see that many of the materials, it's hard to actually turn a pile initially when you have all of this bulky material. So the corn, we got 12, 14 foot long corn stalks that were folded in half, and they were piled on in bunches, although it was layered. You could see when I grabbed a hold of it with a bucket, well, geez, it would hang off to the side and all. So that's gradually going to change over time. So it no longer has those big air spaces in the pile. You can see they're just sort of like dangled down, and they're losing a lot of their structural integrity as they're breaking down and becoming more pliable, more like a sheet instead of a board. So they're going to break down more gradually as well. So I think that those were all the points that I wanted to cover. Oh, one other thing is the integration is such an important component in building some of these compost piles. I think we get some of the richest soil that builds the most nutrient dense plants that we're striving for by integrating and incorporating weeds and various materials, including their root masses as well. Because there's a relative distribution of materials based on how these plants actually grow, and including the root material and leaf material. Getting the whole plant into the systems helps to distribute all of those various elements that are in our soil that come from the mother material, the sand, and that break down into the sand, silt, and clay. So that's all I really wanted to say about this composting situation. It's going quickly. This will probably have to be turned within a couple of days again. I don't know that I'll film it. If there's comments or questions, please leave them below. I'll try to make another video soon to answer some of the comments and questions recently. I know I'm behind on things. So I appreciate you viewing. Thanks so much for watching. Please give it a thumbs up if this was of value, and share it with your friends. And have a fantastic day, folks. Bye-bye now.